for the past 10, 15 years, and other Parliament Watch in Uganda and other
Yes.
places,
Yeah.
that that really we need to now see these kinds of interactive tools as the next level of open. So it's not just the data is available, it's that we have interfaces that make it easier for the public to interact with that information and better understand what's going on in the ways that you describe. So I think we will start to see more tools like that. Again, as everyone gets a bit more comfortable with the technology and with its accuracy, I think we'll start to see some demonstrations like that are public facing. And of course, the long-term potential is that we have, personalized agents helping us understand the things that we care about.
Greetings and welcome to this other episode of the Afripal Dialogues. And today we'll be talking about digitization of legislative processes, but specifically, what is it about? Automation of legislative processes. How does AI, facilitate in improving parliamentary functions, for instance? These are some of the conversations that we look forward to having at the Afripal 2025 that will be taking place in June from the 18th to the 20th at Hotel Africana. Please visit our website and take a look at some of the information that is there and register to attend. But for this dialogue and to have this chat with me is Marci Hariss, who has been gracious to partner with us in co-creating this conference. And she's the executive director and co-founder of PopFox Foundation, which basically works with the different with the U.S. Congress and also different African legislatures and other legislatures across the globe to basically support them in improving their parliamentary functions, but of course keeping with the pace of technology and digitization. Marci, welcome to Afripal Dialogues.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It's wonderful to be with you.
Great. It's good to have you on board. And I know very many times when we talk about AI, for instance, and talk about the digitization of parliamentary functions, sometimes we, of course, in Africa, for instance, we have I could say maybe been a bit slow to adopting, to some of the trends. But of course, we have picked up as time has gone along. But of course, there's still a lot more that needs to be done. And of course, then comes the aspect of AI, which in many ways seem to be scary, but in other ways seems to improve almost everyday functions. But when we talk about AI and its use in legislative processes, what comes to your mind, or what should we think about, and how should we vision it? How should we imagine it working, especially in our parliamentary structures that we have known to be a little bit more, formal or conforming to certain norms that have obviously been handed down. I keep saying for over generations.
Absolutely. So thank you again so much for both the invitation to join at Afripal. I'm so excited to be there in just a month, but also to chat today. And the first thing that I would say about AI in parliaments is that nobody knows. We are all figuring it out now together. So it's true that there have been lots of digitization efforts over the years, and I think every legislature has added are there processes online now, are there documents online now, but we've just all entered a new era together where so many of us are just trying to figure it out. No one is the expert in how all of this should work in the future because we don't know yet. Which is great because, certain digitization efforts that, if you had attempted to start them 5 years ago, it would have been so much more difficult and so much more expensive than it is today. So it's almost better to have not started a legacy project 5 years ago, because there's an opportunity to start fresh today with these new tools that are available. and leapfrog the legacy systems from before. So I think when I think about AI in parliaments today, I think that we are all being creative and thinking about what that might mean, but nobody knows for sure, which really makes it important that there are these international fora for information sharing. And when someone's tried something in Greece or tried something in Brazil, we can come together and hear what worked, hear what didn't work, and we can all learn together. But it really is a new world. So we're all just getting started.
Yeah. So now, when we go to legislative processes, of course, for example, in terms of legislative cycle, for instance, sometimes we think about the different ways in which AI can be used to plug in to improve some of these processes. Of course, for example, during the drafting of these bills, what comes to mind could be, for instance, like the natural language processing, which could be used to check, for example, for inconsistencies. When it comes to committee work and research, how can AI, for example, assist in policy brief generations? Of course, we know AI has made its headway into academic circles with students and even faculty making best use of it for drafting, quick, documentations. But how can it, for instance, be used, to support some of these processes that we know happen, during the legislative cycle, and what other examples could best work, to support them? What kind of tools could we possibly, leverage to make these processes better?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I will say, as someone teaching college classes this year, I will confirm the students are using it. And I think it is a whole new world for how we assign and assess based on that. But I'll pop over and just share a couple of slides to give a little bit of context for your question about specifically the legislative environment. The first thing that I want to emphasize is why we think this is so important. And it really is not just because these tools can be helpful for legislative work, but because these tools are going to transform our societies, our information ecosystems. And that, this pacing problem, which is a concept that a professor coined many years ago to kind of mark the difference between technical change and policy change. What you notice about this is that technical change happens exponentially and much more quickly than the policy change, so that every year there's a bigger and bigger gap. And then, as I was kind of having my aha moment about the pacing problem, I realized that for legislatures, that pacing problem, we don't have just one in legislatures, we have three, because there is the fact that legislators, members of parliament, have to understand AI and how it's changing all of the areas in which they're making laws. So that's the external pacing problem. Do they understand the technology? Yeah. Can they make rational laws about it, et cetera? There's the interbranch pacing problem, because I don't know about in Uganda, but in the US, it is often the case that Congress gives the executive branch many more resources than it gives itself. So you have the legislature that is in charge of overseeing the executive branch or checking the executive branch, but it doesn't have the same kinds of tools to kind of keep pace with the other branches of government. And then there's the internal pacing problem, which is what we're talking about today. Are the legislatures using modern tools for their own work? Are we applying these tools to help do our work better and quicker and more accurately, et cetera? So, to address this pacing problem, the legislatures have to keep up, because society is not going to slow down for our, as you said, the multi-generational institutions that have been known to move slowly. So to your point, it really does require that there is a base layer of digital data to work with. So it's tough to take that leap from stacks of paper to AI. There's a lot of middle steps there to make sure that those stacks of paper, and now we can work with PDFs even better than we could before, to ingest the information and then to think about what kinds of applications make sense using AI. And I really appreciate this slide from the OECD that kind of makes the difference between digitization of just converting paper to digital systems and digitalization. And this is, I think, kind of what you had in mind when you were talking about automation. So turning our existing processes into something digital or more automated. And then I think we've got the what comes next that none of us know about, which is the transformation. How are we going to use these tools to do things differently in ways that we never could just with humans and computers? So I think there's really a lot of potential, some of which we can imagine today, that is just automating our existing systems. And some of it is what comes after that we probably can't imagine today. And you see on the list here, I think that there are lots of potential uses, even today with the technology we have today, whether it's in public engagement and information, helping to more easily publish the documents or handle incoming calls from constituents. There is, as you mentioned, the committee work, the research with the massive reports that members of parliament have to go through to help pull out key sections that are related to issues that they care about or to their districts. Streamlining the proceedings, handling transcripts and translation and questions. And then there's the policymaking and drafting process, which I think is probably the most delicate area, because when you start talking about legal language, that's a completely different world. But I can share some ways that we're thinking about that in just a bit. And then there's also just the general operations of the legislative branch, the human resources and the underlying just how things function to enable the members of parliament to do their work. So I think there are lots of places that this can plug in. And again, we're still just figuring it out.
Yes. And I'd like to start with just something that we saw on the last slide in terms of the operational aspects of it and how AI could be used. And when it comes to capacity building, for instance, for not just African parliaments, but I think parliaments in general, where do we begin from? What kind of training do we begin to, for example, legislatures need members of parliament, parliamentarians themselves? What kind of tools are either available? Are they open access? Is this something that are they behind subscription? Because I think in many ways, especially in situations where there are resource constraints, it becomes hard to transform a system when a lot of things are behind a paywall and are not easily, accessible to people. So I think that is also one of those things that, are a preoccupation of, like you said, we're still figuring ourselves out, but then where do we begin? What aspects, what kind of skills do we need to start, enhancing, right now for parliamentary technical staff, for instance, when it comes, say, for instance, to drafting of laws? Any ideas on that?
Yeah, so I think there are a few different tracks. The first is, and again, we're all learning, is that the new tools that are available just to the general public, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude from Anthropic or Gemini from Google, and there are a few other models and versions out there. And they have free versions that are, I think, really important to just get in there and play with, because, just understanding what these tools are helpful with, and then also what their limitations are, is really helpful for then starting to understand how it could be used in legislative work. So, we at Pop Fox Foundation have over the past year and a half, held a lot of trainings for congressional staff, for example, showing really basic functionality, like, how to clean up a report back from a hearing, or how to turn my notes into a memo, or how to, take a recent announcement and turn it into a press release that is appropriate for the member. And, so playing around with those kinds of basic tools is helpful for just establishing familiarity. And I think everybody should be doing that. Everybody in any industry should be doing that right now. But then there's kind of the next level of the potential for more specialized tools that are specifically designed for specific parliaments or specific workflows. And so we at PopVox Foundation have actually been experimenting with building out some of these really, really narrow examples in order to show members of Congress and staff that it's possible. Because, one of the things that I think we all experience when we first start playing with these tools is we'll go to ChatGPT and ask it something about something we know really well, and that it has, maybe a cursory understanding of, certainly doesn't know what happened last month with it. And you ask a question, it gives you a very general, unsatisfying answer that, it sounds really confident and knowledgeable, but it's, you as an expert know that is missing a lot of nuance. And I think that's when you understand that it's that those are the limitations, that it's, it can generalize, it can sound smart, but until you are taking that next level of kind of providing it with the documents that you want it to reference, it's just not quite as helpful. So, we have very good interns, but we often compare it to, a really, really smart intern that doesn't yet know about our work. And so they are really smart in general ways, but they are not in the weeds unless they're actually opening the book and, digging down into the information that needs to be cited. So really, learning to steer these tools towards those sources and require citations and things like that, I think is when you really start to see the magic. And I can demonstrate some of the little baby tools that we're testing, if that's helpful.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. I'll go back to sharing. Okay. So the first one that I will share, and this is currently, everything I'm going to show you is in beta. Some are not public. And these are really an opportunity to be demonstrations. So these are not in use live things. In the case of this one I'm showing now, it's being tested, but it's not approved yet for House or Senate use. But I can tell you that the use case that we thought about initially was you have all of this information for a congressional staffer about how to work in the office. And it's very difficult for them, especially for new staffers, to understand all of that information. So this staff link chatbot is set up very specifically for junior staff in the US Congress. So these are the legislative correspondents, the legislative assistants, so that they can ask a question. And we've shared here a list of all of the resources that have gone into the tool. So these are all of the resources that the tool is referencing when somebody asks a question. So if I come over here and I ask just a very basic question like, how do I order a flag? This is one of the services that congressional offices provide. It's going to go into those documents because we've turned its creativity level way down and said, don't make anything up. Just go pull from these documents that we've made available. And these are public documents. And you can see here that it starts to explain step by step what a junior staffer should do to go through this process. So, just step by step. And again, we're testing it. It's very possible that some of the information it's providing there is not 100% accurate. But again, this is a demonstration project to just show that you can constrain and design the tool to use trusted information in its answer. You're not just asking chat GPT for its, world knowledge to tell you how to order a flag on Capitol Hill. So we can play with that all day if you want, but we have a few others if helpful, but I just want to stop in case you've got questions about this.
Yeah, so especially when it comes to staff link chatbots, I know, like, for example, you said it's for junior researchers, but then, of course, what comes to my mind is, what about the citizens? How are they able to get this quick information, about, legislation, or get a brief summary, about a particular legislation that has been passed? And of course, there's a question of time, and of course, with the cares of everyday cares, not everybody has the time to, go through about 20 pages or so and try and understand what exactly an act is about, or what does it say, or if an act is going through amendment. Nobody's able to really get those, quick pointers on what are the main points of contention, and how, what are the different viewpoints, for example, that are surrounding this particular debate, especially when someone takes a quick look, for example, at the Hansard, or a committee report, for instance. And so there's the question now of how AI could be, for example, useful to citizens. But again, there's a question of access, because when you talk about AI, there's internet, and then there's also access and affordability aspects that come into play. And how do we mitigate those dynamics, especially in situations where there are resource constraints that are actually visible, and people have to make a choice between either buying data or, and their livelihood?
Absolutely. Well, and I think so just to take a few of those questions in order, on the citizen facing information, I will say everything that you just described, I think, is technically possible. I think we need a lot of testing and trials to make sure that we know that it's accurate before we release something to the public. So that's one of the reasons that we focused initially on this very, very small case that had kind of low risk, because we really need to kick the tires and test it out and make sure that we get it right before we're launching something that is public facing, where people are taking whatever is presented as information, about official proceedings. But I think also, this is something that we feel strongly as an outside, non-governmental, nonprofit organization. And I think the same is true for the Center for Policy Analysis and for Afripal. In many cases, it is easier for us to experiment and put something out that says, this is an experiment. We can't guarantee accuracy. Please try it and tell us if it works well for you, but don't take this as the authoritative source. It is really helpful for third parties to take those first steps to experiment, because it is much less risky for us to do that than for an official source to put it out, because I think that, there's so much difficulty if something's coming from an official source that if you have any kind of technical issues, it feels very high risk. So I think, number one, it's really important for our civil society groups to experiment and show what's possible. Number two, I think your point about the commercial tools being, there are some free examples, but also many of them, you access the nice features at the paid level. I really do think that, in the same way that we've had open parliament movements for the past 10, 15 years, and other Parliament Watch in Uganda and other places, that that really we need to now see these kinds of interactive tools as the next level of open. So it's not just the data is available, it's that we have interfaces that make it easier for the public to interact with that information and better understand what's going on in the ways that you describe. So I think we will start to see more tools like that again, as everyone gets a bit more comfortable with the technology and with its accuracy, I think we'll start to see some demonstrations like that are public facing. And of course, the long-term potential is that we have personalized agents helping us understand the things that we care about and highlighting when there's an issue that we should be expressing our opinion about. And we're all being assisted in our engagement. But I think for right now, the baby steps are very helpful just for ensuring that we are being very careful about the information that's made available to the public.
Yes, thank you. And I think so as we come to the end of this discussion, just in terms of, for instance, the ethical biases, ethical considerations, for instance, and of course the biases. You talked about the fact that when civil society puts out these tools, I mean, it's important, of course, to show that, well, first, it's something that is being piloted, and please let us know if it works. And then many of these have actually been successful and actually been adopted. But of course, we live in an age where there's a high risk of misinformation, and, other aspects such as disinformation. Of course, there's a high risk of malice, cyber, malice and harassment. And how do you think these aspects can be dealt with, especially when it comes to digitization of parliaments?
Yeah, so again, I think that those considerations make it all the more important that we start working on tools that are very specifically for parliaments or open information or legislative workflows, so that we're not just accepting the general tool that, as we've seen over the past several weeks, you can have different changes or tweaks made here or there that completely change what one company or another company is presenting. And that is not something that we can depend on for our important governmental information. These, building bespoke tools for the legislative process or for citizen access, et cetera, I think that's where we have to engage in very different practices. We need to emphasize open source so that anyone can examine the code. We need to make our prompts public. So the prompt that is in the system that says, you are a provider of accurate information about the congressional rules, and you should, and it tells the system exactly how it should present information, that should be public. There's no reason in a public service, public facing system that's not shared. You should, like we did with StaffLink, it should be revealed which sources of information are being referenced by the tool. So, for example, you mentioned Hansard. I think we may see some demos very soon that draw upon the Hansard documents, and just showing that that's where it comes from, and then being very clear about any issues that are reported and how they're fixed. And then the other piece is making sure, again, like I said, that the temperature on these LLMs is turned down, so they are not invited to be creative. They are directed to pull directly from the factual documents that they're provided with. And I think those kinds of practices should become standard for using AI in a public service sort of way. And that's going to be very different than the commercial side of things.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Marci, for joining us today on the Afripal Dialogues. It's the future is obviously, like you say, something that we still cannot fathom, but we can imagine what it would look like, because African parliaments, for instance, have transformed in the way they operate, and much of that transformation has come from technology, digital technologies that have made them more open, more relevant, improved their transparency. And I think more and more we begin seeing that close interaction between the citizens and parliaments, and not just physically but through digital technologies. Thank you very much for joining us once again. We look forward to having this discussion.
It's my honor, and I can't wait to join you in person.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. We look forward to that. Yeah. Thank you. That was it for us on the Afripal Dialogues. Please join us in June from the 18th to the 20th at Hotel Africana as we have more of these discussions, and not just on AI and digitization or automation of parliamentary functions, but on other aspects about parliament and legislative affairs. Thank you.